My grandfather's compass was the only thing I kept when they cleared out his house. It was brass, dented on one edge, and the glass over its face had a hairline crack that split the number 30 in half. He used to say it had never failed him, not once in 40 years of hiking the ridge behind his cabin. When he died, nobody wanted it. I took it because I remembered how it looked in his hand, and because everything else in that house smelled like an ending. I moved into an old rental a month later, a narrow house on the edge of town with warped floors and a landlord who answered the phone only twice. The place was cheap for a reason I didn't understand yet. I told myself it was the sagging porch or the water stains on the ceiling. I was wrong. The compass sat on my nightstand for the first 2 weeks, doing nothing unusual. Then, on a Tuesday night, I woke up because it had fallen off the nightstand and was rattling against the floorboards like something inside it was trying to get out. I picked it up, annoyed, ready to set it back down and go back to sleep. That was when I noticed the needle wasn't pointing north. It was pointing down. Not towards some direction on the compass rose, but tilted as far as its housing would allow, toward the floor beneath my bed. I told myself it was broken. Old instruments fail. I put it in a drawer and forgot about it, or tried to. But 3 nights later I woke to the same rattling sound, except this time it wasn't on the nightstand. It was in the drawer, 6 feet away, muffled through wood, ticking against the inside of the drawer like a trapped insect throwing itself at glass. I opened the drawer. The needle was pointing at the floor again. Not toward the drawer's edge, not toward the window. Straight down, quivering, insistent, like it was straining against its own pin to get closer to whatever it wanted. I laughed it off the next morning, the way you do when the sun is up and the world makes sense again. I even showed it to my coworker, spun myself around in the break room to test it. North, south, east, west. The needle followed obediently the way a compass should. It was only in that house that it changed. Only in that bedroom. Only at night. I started sleeping with the compass in the drawer because I couldn't stand to have it near me and I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. It had been my grandfather's hand around it for 40 years. But I couldn't ignore what was becoming a pattern. Every night, sometime after midnight, the rattling would start, and every night the needle pointed to the same 6 square feet of floor beneath my bed. Curiosity is a slow poison. It doesn't kill you fast. It just keeps you awake, turning a question over and over until the only cure left is to answer it. So one night, instead of shoving the compass back in the drawer, I got down on my knees and pressed my ear to the boards. There was a sound. Faint, rhythmic, almost like breathing, except it had a wet catch to it, like breathing through something clogged. I told myself it was pipes. Old houses have pipes that groan and gurgle for no reason at all. But pipes don't pause. Pipes don't seem to notice you listening and then go quiet, deliberately, the way that sound did the moment I held my breath. I found a flashlight and a screwdriver, and I found the seam where one of the boards had been cut shorter than the rest, fitted back in like someone had lifted it before and set it down again in a hurry. My hands were not steady. I want to be honest about that. When I finally worked the board loose, the smell that came up was old and mineral, like a cellar that had never once seen daylight. Underneath was not what I expected. There was no crawlspace, no dirt, no pipe. There was a narrow chamber, barely wider than my shoulders, lined with what looked like the remains of old newspaper stuffed into the gaps for insulation. And in the corner of that chamber, curled the way something curls when it has been curling that way for a very long time, was a shape I did not have a word for. Not human, not quite. Pale in the way that things go pale when no light ever touches them. And it was looking up at me. It didn't move. It didn't need to. I understood, in the way you understand true things without being told them, that it had been listening to me for weeks. That it had heard my footsteps overhead every night and mapped exactly where I slept. That the sound under the floor had never been a pipe. I don't remember putting the board back. I don't remember calling anyone, and no one ever answered when I tried. What I remember is the compass, still in my hand, needle no longer trembling but locked dead still, pointing at the exact center of that board, as if it had done its job and had nothing left to say. I sold the house's lease within the week, if you can call abandoning a deposit selling anything. I told the landlord what I'd found, and he didn't sound surprised. He just said the last 3 tenants had left early too, and hung up before I could ask what he meant by 3. I still have the compass. It behaves normally now wherever I take it. North stays north. I told myself that was the end of it, that whatever had been under that house stayed under that house, and that some doors, once closed, are meant to stay closed. Then, about a year later, in a different house, a different city, I woke at 3 in the morning to a small, familiar rattling sound. It wasn't coming from the nightstand this time. It was coming from inside the wall behind my headboard, low and rhythmic, like something breathing through a clogged throat. I told myself it was pipes. But I hadn't brought the compass into that bedroom. I'd left it downstairs, in a box, in a closet, on purpose so I would never have to watch it point at anything again. When I went down to check, the box was open. The compass was gone. I searched the house for an hour before I gave up and went back upstairs, and that was when I noticed something I hadn't let myself notice before, something my mind had been quietly stepping around since the moment I found that chamber under the floor a year ago. The newspaper stuffed into the walls of that narrow space, the insulation lining the boards, had been the paper from our town. Old obituaries. And one of the names, half-eaten by damp, had been my grandfather's. He always said the compass had never failed him in 40 years on that ridge. He never said what it had led him to. Or what, in all that time, it had been leading toward him. I found it eventually, on my own nightstand, exactly where I'd first set it down the night I moved into that first house. The needle wasn't spinning. It wasn't shaking. It was standing perfectly, patiently still, pointed at the empty space beside my pillow, where something was already lying down.